Hi, my name is Jeff Lee. I'm a certified criminal trial specialist, and I've been practicing criminal law for over 15 years. I want to share with you 3 tips for criminal sentencing. What are things that you need to show the judge to get the best possible outcome? The first thing I want you to show in a criminal sentencing is contrast. I want you to show, hey, this is me at the time of the offense. And that doesn't mean you have to agree that you were guilty or you committed the crime, but that's you at the time of the offense. Now I want you to compare and contrast that with you at the time of sentencing. A lot of times over a year, 2 or 3 years have passed. So whether you went to trial and said you were not guilty, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go into sentencing and say, well, I did it, especially if you didn't. But you do want to show the difference between yourself at the time you were charged and now. A lot of times people say things that they think look good on paper, like, oh, I live with my mama and I help her with the rent and I work 3 part-time jobs. Now that stuff sounds good, but you know that the prosecutor is looking at the criminal affidavit from the offense and they're saying, well, it looks like this person lived at the same house when they committed the offense. And so the prosecutor is going to boomerang that back on you and say, well, sir, ma'am, you tell us that you know you're not going to get in trouble anymore because you're going to be living with your mom. Weren't you living with your mom at the time of the offense? I have had many sentencing hearings where a defendant insists on calling mama, and she gets on the stand and she says, I'm not going to put up with any foolishness in my house. I have all these rules and regulations, and if I see that my child broke the law, I'll certainly call the police right away. And a lot of times that backfires because the prosecutor says, well, he lived in your house at the time. So that's not contrasting. You can still say, hey, I work, hey, this is where I'm going to be living. Still show those good things, but don't rest on those. Make sure that you show, hey, there's a whole new set of conditions going on in my life that are different than at that time. Otherwise, the judge says, why should I put this defendant on probation? Because I'm putting them right back into the environment that they were in when this offense was committed. Understanding you may not agree that you committed the offense, but if you've gone to trial and lost, that's the way the judge and the prosecutor are looking at it. The second thing I want you to show is growth. I've got a little flower here and I've shaded it so you know it's good art. This is not the same thing as showing remorse. Certainly, a lot of attorneys will say, oh, you got to show you're sorry, you got to show you're remorseful. Well, I don't like that advice because some people are saying, I maintain my innocence. And if it hurts me, it hurts me. I'm not going to go into a criminal sentencing and say I did something I didn't do. And if that's how you feel about that, then there may be consequences. But at the same time, I'm not going to ask somebody to fake remorse. There is nothing more deadly than a fake or shallow apology during a criminal sentencing. Practice with your attorney. If you're not good at giving apologies, if you're not legitimately sorry, if you're saying, I'm innocent, but I'm sorry that the victim feels that way, it would be better just to leave it alone. So when I say show growth, I don't mean that you have to show remorse and come in with your tail tucked between your legs and, oh, I'm so ashamed of myself. If that's how you feel, sometimes that can be very helpful. There is a sentencing factor called acceptance of responsibility, and it would go to that. But don't fake it if you can't legitimately show that you are sorry. So that's why I say show growth. And I have learned, don't go right into a sentencing hearing, a guy's been in jail for 90 days, and assume that there's been any growth. I might say to a defendant, sir, ma'am, you've been in jail for 90 days. Yes, I have. They give you an opportunity to do any reflection? Oh, yes. Well, what did you learn in the last 90 days? And it's just deer in the headlights. They don't know. They don't know what they learned. And I'm not saying they didn't learn. I'm not trying to be funny. I mean, I know in jail sometimes you're just trying to survive, or what you're really thinking about is life is going on without me. How am I going to keep my world together? You don't want to get into your feelings or start saying, what about me, during a criminal sentencing. That's the reality. Judges, prosecutors don't like it. Obviously, if you're in jail for some amount of time, you are thinking, how am I going to keep my job? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to keep my family, my friends, have support from them? So it's not that that makes you a bad person, but if you get into a criminal sentencing and start saying me, and, oh, judge, let me tell you how this has affected my life, you're going to prison. I'm just telling you that that's how it works. So what did you learn in jail? And that doesn't mean, once again, that you have to say you're guilty if you're not, but you learned something. Hey, I still maintain that those drugs were my friend JoJo's, but what I learned is don't hang around with people who do drugs. What I learned is I need to hang around other people. I don't need to live in that neighborhood. I don't need to keep running around with the guys I went to high school with because they're not maybe going anywhere and I want to go places. So you can still say that there's things you learned that, while you were in jail, you learned things. You grew from this experience. What would be different next time? Sometimes I like to sort of reenact the same scenario. Hey, Jimmy, I want to ask you, I want you to go back to the day of the offense, okay? And somebody slapped somebody and a gun came out and you flashed it at that person if Jimmy agrees that he did that. Let's rewind back in time and let's show how that could be different. I want you to imagine you're still standing in that parking lot and Bobby comes up and he says the same rude comment again. What would be different? How would you act different? How would you know that a situation's about to happen that you could avoid instead of having to be in the moment making that decision? How could you avoid that situation entirely? So this is something that you can show that you've learned to the judge. Judge, I've grown. I won't even be in situations like that anymore. I won't be hanging around with the wrong people, and I won't get that upset and then maybe I can't react the way I want to. I'll just avoid that situation. I'll be at home, I'll be at work. So that's the second thing I want you to show is growth. The third thing I want you to show is some specific vision. A lot of times people say, well, I want to go to school. Well, I want to get a job. And my question is, and then? What else do you want to do? Why are you going to school? Why are you going to work? Sometimes we have to flesh those things out. If you've got a busy attorney or, it's a busy day and they are feeling the pressure to run through the docket, or you're feeling pressure on the stand and you say, oh, I want to get a job. I want to go to school. Okay, everybody in a criminal sentencing is saying those things. How can you distinguish yourself from people who say that? I mean, you could come up with that on the drive to the courthouse, and everybody does. And the problem is you sound just like everybody else if you say, I want to get a job. Well, that's great. No, you have to have a specific vision. I had a girl once that I represented, and she said, this is so silly, but I've started a podcast, and I'm very passionate about it, and it's about women's fashion, and I'm not going to bring that up. That's stupid. And I said, no, I love that. One, because the judge has never heard it before, and two, like her face lit up when she talked about it. She was excited. You could see this is something that if she got to go somewhere, like she wouldn't be, whatever offense she committed or accused of committing. That's a specific vision. She had a podcast in mind, and now you want to show the judge the steps that you have taken to make that come true. I want to have a podcast. Okay, be able to say more about it. Imagine that I'm asking you questions on the stand. I hear that you'd like to start a podcast. Yes. And then the prosecutor gets up and maybe they just take a gamble and they go, what's the name of the podcast? What guests are you going to have? When's it going to run? I mean, I'm giving this podcast example, but if that's all you had, you already ran out of gas on this thing, it sounds like it really isn't something that you're that committed to. Another example, a young man I represented, he said, Jeff, I'd like to go to barber school. And I said, that's great. I mean, whatever people want to do, I think that's fine. I love that it's a specific vision. But what if he had said, Judge, I want to go to barber school? Then the prosecutor gets up and says, well, where is the barber school? What's the name of it? How would you work and go to these classes? I mean, you haven't really thought about any of that stuff, have you? That's the impression they're going to try and give the judge, whether it's true or not. It's going to sound like someone told you, hey, you should say you want to go back to school. Maybe that would look good for the judge. No, instead, I want you to get pamphlets for the barber school. And I want you to say, here's a letter of recommendation from one of the professors. Now, I haven't signed up yet because I don't even know if I'm going to get probation or not. But I figured out that the classes, they have night classes, 5 to 7. And as you've seen, I work from 9 to 4. And I thought if I packed my lunch, I could drive straight from there. I've already found out how far away it is from my work to where the barber school is located. And if I could have someone watch my child from 5 to 7, I could go home and still spend some time with them. And after I put him in bed, I could do my homework. I had a guy and he was saying, I've already been cutting guys' hair. The same guy, I've been cutting hair in the prison. I mean, when I was incarcerated, I did that before. And I said, well, what was that like for you to kind of get to be a barber already, even though maybe you don't have the license? And he said, man, I really loved making people feel good about themselves. A lot of times you don't feel good about the way you look or smell or whatever in the jail. But if I could give a guy a haircut, man, that meant everything to me. I had a gift that I could give other people. So this is what I mean by showing a specific vision. It's not enough to say, I'd like to go to school. I'd like to go to get a job. You want to show the judge all the steps that you've taken. Now, that doesn't mean it has to have already come true. But you have to show, I've got a plan here. I've spent some time on this thing. I've printed some stuff out on the internet. I know the name of the school. I know when the classes are. I'm thinking about getting some financial aid for it so that I can attend. And I've figured out how to make this thing work in my life. That's what I want to say about that one. Do your research. Be able to say more about it. Otherwise, it just sounds like something you just came up with. So again, in a criminal sentencing, understanding the trial is already over. Now we're talking about how much, if any, time are you going to have to spend in prison. This is as important as the trial itself. I mean, of course, you wish you had won the trial, or you wish that you didn't have to go to trial. But if you went and lost, it's a criminal sentencing. So I want you to show the judge the contrast between you at the time that you were charged and you today, keeping in mind time has passed, and you want to highlight those differences. Second, I want you to show the growth that you've made. And again, I say, that doesn't mean that you have to come in and, I'm guilty, I'm showing remorse. If you have remorse and it's authentic, then show it. If you don't, talk about things like, what did you learn? Why would this be different next time if you were placed in the same situation? And lastly, third, show a specific vision. Hey, Judge, I'm excited about going to barber school. I'd like to start a podcast. It doesn't even have to be something crazy and unique. But the point is, you've done your research. You bring in pamphlets, exhibits, letters from people. I knew somebody who wanted to be a pilot. And she said, I met my neighbor and he's a pilot. And we went to lunch and he explained how it works and how much you make and how long you have to practice in flight school. And he gave me this letter and he said he thought I might be a great pilot. These are things that show the judge this person doesn't just prefer, probation to jail. They actually sound like a person who's grown, matured, have a specific plan, and I don't feel like if I put them on probation, I'd be putting them right back into the same situation that they were in when the judge believes you committed the crime. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. Certainly work with your own attorney and bring these ideas to the criminal sentencing preparation. You can say to your attorney, hey, I'd like to show a contrast between who I used to be and who I am now. Can we do that? And the attorney will say, sure, I've got some questions for that. But you just want to make sure that you take care of yourself. Don't let an attorney just say, where would you be working? Where would you be staying? What would you be doing with your time? Those questions are fine, but you want to take it to the next level. You want to show contrast, growth, and a specific vision. Good luck in sentencing.